Josh, it's great to have you back on the podcast. I mean, we had Vince here last time talking about all the new products. So, kind of unfortunate to not have you for all those exciting things that we were doing. But you and Vince then made a trip to Tennessee this last weekend and went well for you.
Yeah, I think Wednesday I was actually getting ready for the match. Apparently, if you want to be my AM for the gap grind, I'll load all your ammo and bring your rifle, and you just got to fly in Friday and show up and shoot.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's Vince and I had important things to talk about. So
yeah. So yeah, we went. Vince and I went down there. I was his bro. He was the AM, and we shot pretty well. Saturday, he was having some mag issues, unfortunately, that actually made him time out on a few stages, so he probably would have done even better yet, but we got those fixed Sunday, and we, as a team, ended up 9th place overall. So pretty solid finish for the capacity of shooters down there.
Yeah, and I mean, the course of fire they set up for you pros down there would be just scary for someone like myself to do that. But
yeah, K&M traditionally, it's pretty low wind, and he knows that he's got to put small targets out there to challenge us pros. So pretty small targets. You need a great shooting rifle and good fundamentals to do well there. So
yeah, which it's nice to see that kind of come to fruition, especially the last couple times you've shot gap grind. It was with you and Megan doing it, who couldn't this year for different things. So
she would have been classed up. She's too good of a shooter now. So,
yeah.
But actually, looking back at last year, Megan and I also finished 9th as a team. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, consistency, and I mean that Vince doesn't have near as many matches under his belt as what Megan would have at that time either.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I think just this year, Vince has only shot one match this year, and maybe 3 the year before. So
yeah,
he definitely is still pretty new to the scene.
Yeah. That's always just a big events like that. You run into lots more industry people, and I mean you get attract some pretty high name shooters. So I mean, it's just all that to say to finish 9th, a person should feel pretty good about.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yep. Yeah, Vince asked me, he's like, if Megan was shooting with you, how do you think you would have done? So we probably would have won it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Keep him honest for sure.
Yep.
So we're kind of getting back into we've had a lot of different podcasts here of late where we, interviewed Rod, the one owner of the company, and we talked about wildcatting and new products. So, we wanted to kind of get to more of a broad topic that would kind of hopefully be of interest to everybody. So in this one, we're going to talk kind of about BCs of bullets and, why is that important? How do you check that yourself? And this is one that I myself am about 0% versed on. So for those of you that, maybe feel dumb about a topic, you're in luck because you'll be able to throw me right under the bus for that. So
so BC being the ballistic coefficient of the bullet, basically it's just a way that manufacturers put a value on their bullet of how well that bullet flies through the air.
Sure.
In layman's terms, right? So a lot of times they're tested with Doppler radar to get this number, and then when you get your bullets, there's that BC ballistic coefficient number on the box. That's not really relative to you. Obviously, you're going to use that number, but how they find that number certainly doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
But we need that number to put it into our ballistic solver. So.
Yep. And what does that? So that number is a representation of what that.
Yeah, how well the bullet flies through the air. How much drag does it have? Based on environmental effects, right? Gravity, wind, etc. So how slippery, how efficient the bullet is going through the air.
Yeah. So when you're trying to choose a bullet in a given caliber, is that off the box number you heed to a lot? I mean, is really important to you?
That's a good starting point. If you start with that number and put that in your ballistic solver, that's going to get you generally pretty close. And sometimes it's perfect. It'll just work. Other times you'll see, depending on barrel, even barrel wear, an older barrel may produce a lower BC just because it's rough around the bore. And so it does a little more damage to the bullet when it comes out. So your BC may vary from that as well. But up or down a few points, you're going to be pretty ballpark there.
Yeah. Which those little things like you're talking that can affect that. I mean, that really, adds some questionability about what that number is on the box. I mean, if I'm a manufacturer, I have to get to that number somehow. And likely the way I got to that number isn't going to be the exact same setup as what you have.
Yeah, and even some, with a grain of salt, some may skew that number for marketing purposes.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. They could inflate that to look like it's a better bullet than it is. But most of your big name, popular bullets, they've all been pretty close in my experience. The Sierra, Hornady, Berger, those are kind of the three I have the most experience with, and especially Berger. They're always within a couple points is where mine end up truing out.
So now how specifically do you true out a BC for yourself?
I mean, you mean to the exact number?
I guess where you're saying,
you're asking, how do I get there?
How do you get there? When you're saying that, I have my calculation is pretty close to what they're usually coming out at. How are you getting to that number?
So within the ballistic solver, there's a few things that are vital to be accurate. One is going to be our velocity. So I like the Garmin chronograph. Use any type of chronograph that gets you a velocity of that projectile. And then the bore height. Bore height's important within the calculator as well. Bullet length, diameter, all these things need to be pretty much spot on for you to start tweaking these things and know you're going the right way with them. Verifier 0 is good. And then the environment. The environment's another big one when you're truing. Pull it from a weather station or Kestrel or whatever you have available, get it as close as you can. So those few things really need to be spot on. And then I think I mentioned a good 100-yard zero if that's what you're going to use, and tell the calculator that's where you're zeroed at. And then also need to account for wind deflection. I like to try and true when it's not as windy, so I'm not worried about that. Some people may have heard of AJ, also known as aerodynamic jump. Wind will not only, move the bullet left and right when shooting, it can also move it vertically up and down. So typically a right twist barrel, that bullet's going to be going down and to the right. So if you have a left to right wind, it's actually going to push the bullet down harder. And if you have a right to left, it's kind of going to help hold it up as it spins into that wind. So that can change that number too.
Sure.
So when we're truing, if we can do it on a calmer day, so we don't have to worry about that calculation, that's best to do it. So now we have a good zero. We know our velocity, scope and bore height, we know is to the, 10th of an inch. If you're off on that half an inch, I mean, it could be a couple tenths difference in mils at, 5, 6, 7, 800 yards. And guys are going to start tweaking their BC number when really it's your scope height over the bore. That's just off. So we have our environment updated. Now we're going to start at, say, 600 yards. Typically inside of 600 yards, it's a velocity thing. And then once we go past 600, that's where we start to play with the BC. I like to try and true as far as I can within, supersonic speeds. I don't like to get subsonic. So for like the cartridges we shoot, I'm not going to 1,500 yards. Past that, it gets subsonic, and you're kind of wasting your time there anyway. So typically 1,000 yards, 1,200 yards in that realm, that's a good place to true out BC. So what I'll do is look at, I'll just take my shots and see where it's landing. For me, I use steel plate and paint a water line on it, aim at the water line. Well, if I'm right on it, everything's great and dandy. If I'm high or low, then that's when we start tweaking some of those numbers to get it to line up. And then you'll see if you walk it back in, it should still be water lined at, say it's 400 your closest, 1,000 your farthest, and we're water lined everywhere in between.
So that's where it's like if you're, and I'm making up numbers because I don't know them exact like you do, but if you're, if you have a BC of 275 and now all of a sudden you're hitting you're not water lining, that's where then you're tweaking that 275 number till it would get water lined.
Yeah.
Then.
So the higher the BC number, the less drag. The lower the BC number, the more drag. So essentially, if we're shooting at that 1,000 yards and we're coming in low, well, we've adjusted to what our calculator has told us to. So we're low, we need to come up more. That means there's more drag on the bullet. So our BC number actually needs to get brought down. So that way the calculator tells us to come up more on the scope. So then when you make that adjustment in the calculator with a lower BC, it's going to say, hey, instead of 7.6, go to 7.7, dial at 7.7. And then now, if that's all it needed was a click or whatever. Yeah. I'm not saying these are exact numbers, but right. An example here, that'll bring us up into that water line. And then we want to verify with that tweak we made, okay, now when we come back in, are we still water lined or are we now high? So there's some balancing act there. But
so when you say usually in front of that 600-yard mark or 500-yard mark, it's a velocity thing. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? Just that it's a
because the BC doesn't weigh so much on, if you put the box number on there, you're probably, as long as your velocity is correct, 0 to 600, you're probably going to be pretty well off. The time of flight and all the other characteristics of what
it's not losing any energy at that point.
Well, it is always losing energy.
Right.
But there's just not enough variation in the system yet. That's why we want to true out farther to correct that BC.
Sure.
So typically that's just what we say. BC is past 600.
Yep.
If there's issues elevation wise before 600, it's usually a velocity error or something else in the system, or just that the zero, you're not actually perfectly zeroed. If you're shooting and you're tracking man, everything's a 10th high everywhere I go. One, it could be an environmental thing, or two, it could be your zero just as a 10th high at 100 yards. Yeah. So just fix your zero, and then everything starts tracking again.
So like when we were just a comparison, I guess, when we were going on up north to go fishing with me and my family, I drove my truck for a while and we're going so far. And then now my wife takes over driving my truck and she's like, why is your truck shaking so much? I'm like, well, I don't usually drive it at like 85, 90, so it's like once I hit that speed range, some of my truck's BC started going a little awry at that, where if I kept it at this speed here, I'm just not going to notice where that starts to break down necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, shot for shot example there.
Right.
how that works.
Yeah, and so every lot of bullets, every barrel, it could have a little bit of a different BC. So usually when I get a new barrel, I'll just verify, like actually currently running 105 Burger hybrids. The box will say it's G7 at 275. Mine's trued up to 270. So yeah, it's 5 points less, but 5 points really is not much when we're talking about most of our targets are inside 1,000 yards. You're not going to shoot the difference. So.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess that, how much that, so you saw 5 points there. Do you see usually a drastic enough where you have to make some serious changes, be it from a barrel or lot to lot of bullets?
No. I mean, generally about 5 points up or down is what I've seen in the past.
Yeah.
And like I said, sometimes it's right on.
And that probably speaks to, the quality of components that you're using too. I mean, if you, are just buying your whatever factory pre-fit or something, putting on there, all those components from both the rifle and the bullet are going to make a big difference.
Well, that and, we talked about barrel, but also like twist and the speed you're pushing the bullet. That can have an effect too. So say you're running a twist that's maybe not quite fast enough. It's still stabilizing it, but it's not the best for stability. You're going to lose a little bit of BC points from that. And then also velocity itself, pick up some velocity, spin that bullet a little faster. Those things, those are basically what is kind of skewing that. And then just the condition of the bore itself too can play with that number.
Is there anything, I mean, this is something you've played with a lot, and you probably have kind of a general idea going into it of what your potential variance is, being I'm using, you've run a lot of Burger hybrid 109s, 105s.
135s, yeah.
You probably have a general idea of where your variation could be. Now, if I'm just coming off the gate, or I'm switching calibers completely to something else, is there like a roadmap someone should use? Like, I guess, like where you said a twist rate could matter in that.
I mean, as far as that, Burger has that barrel twist bullet stability calculator on their website. You punch in, they got an environment section, temperature, and altitude will play the biggest part in how stable a bullet will be, and then the twist rate and the velocity you plan to shoot it, and it'll tell you then, how stable that bullet is, and if it's stable enough to perform at 100% capacity, or if it's marginally stable where, okay, we can still expect good groups, but maybe not the 100% BC. It'll tell you all that stuff. So that's a good place to start. I've referenced that many a times, but yeah.
I think when you're thinking PRS or NRL or all these other little things, there's always kind of that top 10%, that group at the top that, you see these guys that kind of, whatever match they go to, they seem to end up landing up there. And I feel like all that middle of the pack guys and things are, people are always looking for that one little thing that could make a big difference in that. To me, this seems like one of those where a person could just always punch the number in that's on the box and shoot really well, still up to that 500 yards. Well, now they're dropping some of these longer shots just because they're not being critical on not only their BC number, but some of the other numbers too,
Yeah, I think the environmental stuff and some of the other numbers within the solver, they say good info in, good info out,
yeah,
bad info in, bad info out. So whatever you give that thing, as long as it's right, it's going to help you succeed.
Yeah.
So.
I guess I just would be curious, almost polling and finding like, okay, what percentage of shooters at a match are truing out their BCs of their bullets?
I think 95% are.
Sure.
Are they doing it correctly? I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I think I was playing with a calculator on the way here, actually, because I knew we were going to bring this up, and just changing that bore height. Say the standard bore height in the solver was 1.5 inches. Typically, like mine's 2.1. I know that, like 2.12. If you go from 2.12 to the 1.5, that's enough I think I did 800 yards. It was like 0.2 higher. I needed to come up with that 1.5. Well, if that told me to come up 0.2 more, that's going to make, if I was true in BC, make the BC be like probably 15, 20 points lower than what's on the box to get that to line up. Yeah. So that's how just even a half an inch of bore height difference,
right,
be a 1/10 and a half, 0.2. That's worth a lot of BC points, and you could start fudging that number, and then now you're really all over the place.
Yeah.
So
well, and it wasn't that long ago we did that class where we had 10 fairly new, more introductory class to PRS, and I mean that was something that I watched you do, when they were sitting there at their 100-yard line and they're putting all their stuff in. I mean, you were running around with calipers like, hey, let's be sure, what do you have in there for a scope height? Oh, it's this. Okay, well, let's measure it and be sure. I mean, it's just kind of
Yeah, and some guys were pretty close, and others were like, we're not even close here.
Right.
We're
Right.
quarter inch, 3/8 of an inch off. Like,
Yeah. That's where I just wonder that, at what, you know, you brought Vince as your am there, and like I say, we were here talking while you were loading all his ammo and
mhm.
putting all that stuff in, and you guys were shooting the same caliber, same bullets and
Yeah,
things there. So you had a lot of that. When Vince would shoot, when you would shoot, a lot of those things would have been relatively similar as
yep,
far as the calls being made and stuff. And I don't think if Vince left to his own devices that he was going to be as particular about some of that
yeah,
is
yeah. I
what you
mean,
are.
so like he's running my backup gun. We both ran 6 GTs with 105 burgers, and they actually both guns were within 10, 15 feet a second. So I was like, this is gonna be perfect.
Yeah.
Saturday morning, we both zeroed same time, same place, laying next to each other. Pulled our speeds again before the match started, just to double verify what we had in the solver was correct. And then periodically, every couple hours throughout the day, I'm swinging the Kestrel, getting environment live updates, and we're both punching it into
Yeah.
the environment portion of the solver and updating that stuff. So we're on top of that too, and that's the things that add up. And going back to the class guys there. I
Yep.
remember one guy, we're running chronographs for everybody because our next step is run these out to 800 yards and make sure everyone's water lined before we start the rest of
Yeah.
the class. And yeah, well, it sped up like 50 feet a second. Well, when I last shot it like 2 months ago, it was 2740 or something.
Yeah.
It's like 2 months ago, and you're probably not even using the same lot of ammo. I think he was running factory. It's
Yeah.
like this is why you need to check this stuff
Oh,
for what ammo you have currently and this barrel and everything. The condition now, who knows? Maybe it was clean when he shot it 2 months ago, and now he's got 250 rounds on it. All that
Yeah.
fouling too, sped up.
Yeah. Well, and just think of, what better cell to start reloading in some degrees too, because I know, you're not you're definitely a pro shooter. I'm not, the amount, but it's pretty important to you that you get that same lot of bullets that you're shooting through this so that you kind of know what it is that you're doing. You're not having to do this whole process every match to know where it's at.
Pretty much all my components, I try and buy enough of a lot to shoot an entire barrel's worth.
Yeah.
Just so once I find it, it doesn't change throughout. Right. You start changing a lot of bullets, a lot of powder. Well, now you're potentially chasing a BC, you're chasing a accuracy thing,
Right.
you're chasing speeds again because this lot's half a grain faster than that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You always want you, the shooter, to be the variable that you have to control, not guessing what everything else is. And I think it's like, you think of even 5 years ago, what percentage of shooters knew what their velocities and things were. Even I guess I'm just pointing more to like the competition is getting better and better all the time now that there is a unaffordable, easy to set up Garmin that there is. More people know what those numbers are than, that guy that measured out at during our class. I mean, he would never, if he didn't have the tools there to measure, he would never know match to match. It could be significantly different from one to the other, even greater than what we saw. Probably.
Yeah, and I mean, the Magneto speed was out for a while, and before someone started making the custom mounts to get it off the barrel, you strap that thing to the barrel. So now you're doing multiple tests because you're doing a test just for velocity, and then you're doing an accuracy test because strapping anything to the barrel can change harmonics, which can mess with the groups. So there's that. Then you had the lab radar, which was some people had problems, but it was a good product overall. But it's like carrying around a small suitcase. Where now we're to the point with these Garmins.
And it was a dollar amount too. I mean, it was
And now, I mean, heck, we're running stages with these Garmins strapped to the guns. You don't even know they're there, and you're getting velocity during the match.
Yeah.
So you can always stay up on top of everything.
Well, those were some things that I don't think even several years ago you knew what yours was. I think you had even like switched some powders and stuff because you found that one sped up pretty significantly throughout the end of a long match that.
Yeah, some powders, they're just dirtier and
Yeah.
tend to speed up a little more sensitive to temperature. So you're always kind of battling, I can expect 20 to 30 feet a
Yeah.
second throughout the course of the day. But
Yeah. And
yeah,
would you have
now,
known that,
no,
5 years ago?
before it was like shoot your state or your day. And then at the end of the day, okay, now we can throw the magneto on. So we're not going to run
Yeah.
the magneto during a stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like bayonet sticking out
Yeah.
on the end of the barrel. But you're like, oh, shoot, I'm up 30 feet a second. No wonder I was going high,
Yeah.
So
Yep.
now you can stay on top of it or just run a clean powder that doesn't seem to care what
Yeah.
the temperature is and doesn't get dirty, and then you don't have to worry about that. But
Yeah. Now there's, when I look at that box and it has my BCs, it's usually now there's 2 different numbers.
Yep.
Correct. Does that mean squat to you?
No, I just run G7. G7 is for the newer, longer boat tail bullets. The G1 was based off of like the flat base projectiles back in the day. And actually, if you get a box that has just the G1, but you're wanting to shoot it for long range, so G1 was kind of graphed out for shorter range stuff.
Yep.
So like the models on the graphs aren't as clean cut as
Sure.
G7 for shooting far. So, but if you have a bullet that just has the G1 on it and you want to convert it to know, hey, I want to run G7 in my ballistic solver.
Yep.
You take your G1 number and times it by 0.512 is what I've used, and that's very close. It'll spit out a number of what it is.
Yeah.
I think the 109 hybrid is like a 0.568 G1. If you times it by the 0.512, it comes out to like 290 and some change, which the box says 292. So right there, you're within a point.
You're pretty close.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And anything else BC wise you want to touch base on or think is important for people to know just in that? I mean, I think it's really good you showed, from this now we know how to calculate it, and what its impact can be, which is pretty significant. And I think kind of that gave some defense of like, hey, for the most part, most manufacturers, what they're putting on there is about as close as what they can get for it. You're not, don't call up Hornady and say, well, I'm measuring this. This is, bananas. It's almost like reiterating the importance of things we preached from before. It's kind of what the numbers are, what your land's length is, what this is. A lot of it is really pretty relative to yourself. If that number is different, then that just means you're going to have to change how you're setting things up to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's much else to, as far as in general, I know, as far as variation, that can be important. A small variation within a specific bullet is almost more important than having that higher number.
Yeah.
Because as you get farther out, if that variation is bigger, you're going to get more vertical dispersion in your groups.
Do you find, like within your lot, I guess like within your lot, how much variation do you find in terms of BC within that lot?
I couldn't answer that, honestly. I mean, you would need radars
Not a
and
measurable
shoot every bullet at 1,200 yards on paper, and to say it was the bullet or my velocity or the conditions is almost impossible without a radar. So
Right.
I don't have $500,000 radar or whatever them things cost. So
Yeah.
hard to answer that, but I can tell you I've ran the same BC this entire lot I've been running, almost 2 barrels worth now, and it's been great. So,
but I guess in short terms, you haven't found anything overly significant where there's been a huge change within a lot.
No,
that
it's not like I'm going to a match and I'm running 270 in the calculator. And at the end of the day, I'm like,
Yeah.
boy, I need 265.
Right.
No,
You're
no,
not
that's-
finding a way. You're not needing to invent a way to sort them
Right.
via that, which would
which
be
a lot of, F class or other long range disciplines, they'll sort by length. And a lot of guys will say the
Yeah.
length is the most important part for the consistent BC,
yeah.
as the length plays a big role in that number.
Yep.
So I know guys sort by length now. So I guess if you're sorting,
Yeah.
there's that. And there's some guys that point. I've never pointed bullets. Haven't felt I needed to.
Yep. But those would be like those practices are people attempting to be sure.
The pointing is attempting to make the BC more consistent.
Right.
And you may get, if done right, you can get a slight gain in BC.
Right. I know before we started the podcast, you'd mentioned like, hey, pointing's not something I really want to go into a lot because I don't do it. And, and it's one of those things that someone could get on and say, this works really well and this is how I do it. And, but it is one of those things that potentially, I think potentially if you could, like where you said, if done well, it's one of those things you could screw up more than you
it's
make better if you don't know what you're doing.
There's a point of no return on that one. That's one reason I probably haven't messed with it.
And most, especially myself, probably can't shoot the difference.
No, not at all.
Of what it is when you're buying good quality components for that. I'd kind of with a lot of the topics that we talk about, there's overlap and intertwining and interweaving that sometimes it's hard to keep. Like when we're talking about BC, it's hard to stay on that highway without taking the 5 other exits for other topics that could affect what we're talking about. And I was kind of talking to you before about now we've kind of done this podcast thing for a little bit now. We've got at least enough episodes to fill a bushel basket a little bit. You could hold in your hand or put in your pocket now. And I was kind of trying to think of like, hey, go back to the reason why Forster wanted to do a podcast to begin with too. And it's one of the big reasons is honestly selfish, like to sit down with, you and I aren't usually in the factory going to take an hour to sit down and talk about something like this that is pretty important to Forster Products, customers, and our business overall. And I think even just it's been interesting to me now that we've done one to listen to other ones and hear things about like Zeramat arms and some of those other like 419. There's a lot of like smaller companies that really make this whole industry survive. I'm saying like sub 100 employee companies that have a pretty big impact and historically never really had a voice in the industry because it's wouldn't afford the full page ad on the magazine and even those don't necessarily say who the company is. So I don't know. I just look forward to having more conversations like this, sitting down with some of those other smaller companies. And I think in the end, it's just kind of good for as good as it may be for our customers to hear these tips from a shooter like yourself. It's probably even better for us to hear, get a better picture of the industry and our customers understand who we are and what we're doing. So
yeah. Seems like, we can just provide any little information too. It's just a simple way to accomplish that goal.
Yeah.
And if it can help somebody, fantastic. Yeah. And like you've said before, comment stuff if you want to. We've probably done it or tried it. If you want to talk about it, so we can give us an idea for the next few podcasts. But
yeah, and smaller company, not a lot of people. Like we're not individually gonna talk to everybody. I think if you go in our ERP system, we've got 70,000 customers in there, and there's more customers than that because there's ones that have never bought directly from us before. Well, we're plain not going to sit down and have a conversation with all 70,000 people. There's not enough time and not enough of us to do that. So this is kind of our way of extending that, even if you never do find the need or to call and ask a question to Josh or myself, we're happy to answer the phone too. At least we kind of have the opportunity to go, well, gosh, I really don't like that guy. I don't want to pick up the phone and talk to him, or hopefully the other way around, and understand kind of who Forster is as a company. And we also kind of did it too, like there's a lot of sales pitchy things out there, and not that we aren't going to try to pitch you one of our tools, because we're passionate about what we do and do think it is the products and things we make are really good, but we want to kind of keep bringing this back to just the content that it is, the shooting sport we like, and we're going to try to keep bringing more people in to talk about that. And I mean, one of our better videos was sitting down with Craig at 419 as far as the performance of people that watched it, and gosh, I mean, that was as good as it was for people to watch. It was good for me. I mean, you don't always take that 30, 50 minutes to sit down and have that conversation. And that's probably what we need to do more of. At times it's, you get wrapped around the axle on what you're doing day to day to not take the time to do that. So,
right. Yep.
So hopefully some people learned some things about BC. I definitely did. And now makes me question lots of things I've done in my reloading and shooting. So we'll have to go get it figured out, I guess.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, Josh.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.